Now, if he created the heaven, he has a problem. Because now we don't know where he stays.
Cause of the universe can't be material. Something had to be eternal. Physics, matter and energy can't be eternal, but a supernatural being can be eternal.
African spirituality says you don't depend on anybody. You are, the creator yourself.
One of the most weird questions that has been asked by young people, young adults, African spiritualists, humanists, feminists, and all those ists is that who created God? Who created God? And for them, it is a very important question that is standing between life and death. It is a question that will determine if they will receive God or not. There is a question that will determine if there is something called heaven and hell. There is a question that determines if there is something called good or bad. So who created God? You see, when we look at science says that in the beginning there was a big bang. So is God a big bang? Was God created within the big bang? Or does God pre-exist before the big bang? So they have those questions, and those questions, it will determine if actually everything spiritual is real. Right? My name is Pastor William, and I'm so excited that you are with us today. Welcome to Community Podcast. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, and let's grow together.
Well, it's a go-to question for many atheists. It's like a gotcha question. They pose this thinking there's no answer to it.
Right.
And, Bertrand Russell, probably the most famous English atheist after Richard Dawkins in recent times, and Richard Dawkins, and Australia's own Philip Adams, for example, this is their go-to question for why I don't believe in God. And I think maybe they've not thought about it very much, which is a strange thing to say, but when you think about it, maybe they think the targeted person really has no idea, and therefore it's, as I say, a gotcha question. But it's not a very logical question, because the question presupposes that God had a beginning.
Right.
Because only things that have a beginning need to be created. So, that's where it falls down. They haven't really thought about it very much, because the Bible reveals God as being eternal. What's that mean? No beginning. From everlasting to everlasting, the eternal one. So God is eternal. He didn't have a beginning, and something which is eternal can't have a cause, can't have a beginning. So there's no cause. So no Christian believes in a God who had a beginning.
Yes.
So the question's a bit like saying, well, to whom is a bachelor married?
Yes.
Hang on a minute. A bachelor, by definition, is not married. So the question is nonsensical. And the question, who created God, is basically nonsensical.
The reason why we call him God is because he didn't come from somewhere. Oh, no. Otherwise, he's just your brother or your cousin. But the moment he is called God, forget about coming from somewhere. No way. Now, here it is. The moment people say, who created God, they are saying there is a time where something created God. But by saying there is a time where something created God, they are missing the point that something that created God is actually the God we are looking for.
You are, the creator yourself. Just, know yourself and know your abilities, right? You don't need an intermediary, right? And this social control book is always emphasizing an intermediary. If it's not Jesus, it's a priest. If it's not this and that. African, spirituality teaches you about nature, how you are part of nature. So you don't need all this.
You see, this question is a very important question to them, and in their own right, they are right. So who created God? You see, when we sit down and we look at what Christian scholars in the past have said, one of the things that they've said that is God is pre-existent. There is nothing that can create God. One other person asked that, if God is king, who created his throne? Did he create his throne? And, if he created his throne, does that qualify him as king? Because a throne makes you a king. A crown makes you a king. But here's the thing about God is that one thing that we need to be able to realize is that God is pre-existent, right? That's one. So that means that now God is life on himself. Nothing created God. Nothing can create God. Nothing can make God God. God doesn't need a throne to make him God or a king. God doesn't need a crown to make him God or a king. Men, they need crowns, and men need a throne to make them king. But God doesn't. Men need people to say, you are king, but God doesn't. You see, sometimes when they ask these questions, they feel like they are cornering us, making us think that we are confused and we are lost. But one thing that you need to be able to understand there is, if you're a spiritual being and you are connected to God and you are sensing the presence of God, you will know that there is power in just saying that there is no need for anyone to call God God to make him God. That's why he says to Moses, I am that I am. He doesn't have a name. He doesn't need a name. He doesn't need to be qualified to have a name or to be God. You see, some things like Jehovah, things like God, things like Jireh, Tsikenu, those are titles attributed to him because he is divine. And now, people like Abba, they will sit down and say, yeah, but other cultures and tribes, they have their own traditions and religions and their own Bibles. And we don't argue that. What we are arguing is that there is one creator, which is God. So God doesn't need someone to make him God. Doesn't need a throne to make him God. He doesn't need to be created to be God. He existed before all things were. So one thing we need to be able to understand about knowledge. This is what I'm going to say in passing about knowledge. Knowledge is dangerous when you don't know how to apply. See, people will sit down and say, yeah, but you didn't answer us. But I did. You see, sometimes people need people that come from varsities to come and sit down and use big terms, but that's not what you need. You see, as African people, if there is one thing that we know for sure, is that wisdom comes with age. So when someone speaks wisdom, you can clearly hear that there is something wise that is spoken. You don't need to go to varsities and so forth to get these big terminologies for you to be able to understand something spiritual. Right? So now you need to be able to understand when someone says God does not need a throne, God does not need a crown, God does not need anyone to qualify him as God. He existed before everything else were. Everything lives in him. Everything finds identity in him. Just because we find identity in him doesn't mean that he needs to find identity elsewhere. The Big Bang does not give God identity. It doesn't. It doesn't. Science doesn't give God identity. The Bible doesn't give God identity. It gives us an understanding who God is. So we need to be able to understand God was not created. He cannot be created. He is the creator, and everything is held together in him and lives through him. Right? So there is no name, no throne, no crown, no garment that we can give him that will make him God. He doesn't need our worship to be God. Our worship doesn't make him more powerful. It doesn't. It doesn't add value. It makes us recognize, actually, that prayer, praise, worship, it reminds us who he is. Right? So it doesn't make him bigger, doesn't make him stronger. It reminds us. So say you are going through a situation and you remember that God is a God that heals. Then in you remembering, you develop faith for him. Then you receive your healing. You see, you need to be able to understand with spiritual things, you cannot answer them in accordance to what happened in the past or what might happen or what the letters say. You need to be able to connect with him and be able to understand him. Guys, thank you so much. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, comment down below. I was not preaching. I was merely bringing an awareness to who created God.